Good morning, everyone. It is a 4-shot of espresso kind of morning for me, but there's a lot of things to discuss in the Sebastian Rogers case today that has happened over the last week. So let's just get into the information. First off, I just want to clarify that there was glasses found while searching for Sebastian. However, these glasses were confirmed to not be Sebastian's glasses. So now that that's out of the way, let's dive into some new information from interviews. I think some of the most shocking information that's come out right now is when Seth Rogers, who is Sebastian's father, went live with a YouTuber called Justin on TikTok on his YouTube channel. And you can just tell at this point that poor Seth is just so exhausted. He's been out there every single day trying to search for his son. And then he keeps finding out things on interviews such as the CPS calls and just information about Chris and Katie. And he's finding out this information the same time we all are, while he's watching other interviews or being interviewed himself. So all of this combined with the stress and exhaustion, and it seemed to have let out a fire in him because he revealed some big things. But the first thing that has really stuck out to me is this conversation around his divorce with Katie, which a lot of people have been speculating on. And that is because the information around Katie filing for divorce is very eerily similar to what Chris did to Nina. And I also learned that Katie was working for the military. She was stationed in San Diego, which is the exact same military base that Chris was stationed at, and that Seth was working as an armed security guard on the base. And if you remember, Nina claimed that Chris was cheating on her with a woman who was asking him when he was going to be arriving in San Diego. So that makes me wonder, connecting all the dots, if he was in fact cheating on Nina with Katie, which makes me wonder what the timeline is in all of this, and if Katie was cheating on Seth with Chris. Because from what we do know, Chris and Nina were married when he started dating Katie, and Katie and Seth were married when Katie started dating Chris. And then around all of this happening, Chris files a protection order against Nina, and Katie files a protection order against Seth. So was this all planned and calculated is something I'm really curious about. I would like to know. I would like to see the receipts. Again, these are just connections and patterns and just weird red flags that I keep seeing. And it just leaves me with more questions, honestly. And people will ask, does this have anything to do with finding Sebastian? And I think it could, because I think it plays on the character of these people that are involved around his disappearance, especially when there keeps being so many similarities and so many patterns. When it comes from what we do know about this entire divorce between Katie and Seth, Katie seemed to make the same allegations that Chris made against Nina. Katie filed a protection order that included her and Sebastian's names in it so that Seth had no access to either of them. She was trying to get custody of Sebastian. And Seth also seems to say that this kind of came out of nowhere. He seemed to have been kicked out of his own home, essentially. The police came and tried to raid his home, and they took his legal weapons that he owned for his job. Seth says that he cooperated fully. And we heard the same thing happen with Nina. Nina's daughter got taken from her out of nowhere, only allowed to see her for certain supervised visits. But in the end, in both cases, both the protection order against Nina and the protection order against Seth, they seem to have won in the end because Seth still got custody of Sebastian and Nina still got custody of Faith. So what is going on here? Yes, I understand. Yes, I fully could understand and agree that the legal system does not always work. People get awarded custody all the time that shouldn't be. We've seen that happen in the Harmony Montgomery case, where her father got custody of her even after all these allegations were against him. So the legal system doesn't always work with giving the correct parent custody. We see it. We see it happen way too often. However, the court seemed to rule that there was no evidence to support any of these claims and gave them split custody. So what is the truth? Seth also goes on the claim that Katie is the one that put Sebastian on all of the medication that he was on, but explains that Sebastian had no issues with trouble sleeping or regulating when he was at his house. And he seems to kind of feel like Katie was just trying to medicate Sebastian instead of trying to fix the root of the cause or do other things. He gave an example such as maybe taking Sebastian out to play at a park or something and get his energy out instead of him basically just sitting at home and playing video games or something like that, where he's not exhausting his energy and then he's not going to fall asleep easily. And that's valid. That's completely valid. You see that even happening with people with pets. You have a dog, but you don't go and exercise it properly, and then it acts out, and then people are mad at the dog. The same thing can happen with children. If you're not meeting a child's needs, either physically or mentally, they could eventually start acting out. Now, we do know he was diagnosed with autism and some other things very recently, but that also seems to be around the time that Seth is claiming Katie put him on all of this medication instead of trying to find alternative things to fix the problem. But you know what? Every parent makes their own decisions on their children. However, Seth did make some new scary allegations that are heartbreaking. Seth would go on to accuse Katie of allowing a 13-year-old boy to be alone with Sebastian when he was around 7 to 8 years old and claims that Sebastian was SAed by this child. He alleges that Katie and Chris did nothing to stop this child from being alone with Sebastian. They allowed this child to be alone with Sebastian, and because of that, it resulted in Sebastian being SAed. Seth also claims that Katie and Chris never took Sebastian to a therapist to get proper help to, talk through it and process what had happened to him. Seth claims the attacker was only 13 years old and that the state of California wouldn't do anything because of the child's age. And you can honestly see the heartbreak and the pain when he's telling the story.
Pretty big difference. You're 13 and my son, you're a teenager. My son is not a teenager. He's still playing with Hot Wheels and Legos, and he's building things. He's playing video games, and you're a teenager. You go out and you have your own, age appropriate group that you play with, and they were letting this kid play with my son, and they weren't checking on him, and then this kid took my son's innocence and he molested him.
So you take your time.
And there was nothing I could do in California because the kid was 13. But they let that happen. And they didn't bother to try to even get my son help until last year. Here, my son is just turned 15 in December. It means he's been dealing with an emotional, stressful, traumatic incident for the last 7 years. And I've been trying to help him. I've been trying to get him help. Going to talk to his doctor and telling them what happened. And for the doctor to tell me, she was like, I knew none of this stuff. And I'm like, really? Because he's supposed to be seeing a therapist for this. And she's like, well, he's not seeing the right type of therapist for this type of trauma. I care about my son. And actions speak so much louder than words. And there's just no justification for the actions that I have seen from them. They're not parents. They're not parents at all. And I want to know what happened to my son.
Seth saying, and I quote, "There's no justification for the actions I see from them. They're not parents. They're not parents at all." End quote. And he really is just saying what all of us are thinking, because the actions that everyone has seen from Katie and Chris are not actions of parents that seem caring, and it's very suspicious. It's very odd, and that is why there are so many people that are pissed off right now. The court of public opinion is outraged. If they were out there boots on the ground every day helping search for Sebastian, I think 90% of the things that people are speculating on wouldn't even be happening, because we'd say, okay, at least they're trying, they're putting an effort, they're all putting anger aside for each other in search of the common goal, which is finding Sebastian. But that's not what's happening here. And it gets even worse, because the more information that's coming out on top of everything that already has is making Chris and Katie and the Proudfoot family in general just look awful. Seth would go on to allege that Chris told Seth's mother, Sebastian's grandmother, that Sebastian is a PDF file. Seth saying, and I quote, "No, he's not. He's a victim that hasn't gotten the help that he deserves, and he needs to, so he can get over the traumatic incident that has happened to him. That should have never ever happened underneath their watch to begin with." End quote. Seth is also claiming that Chris made statements that he does not want Sebastian around his daughter, Faith. So what all of this is saying is that Chris went to Sebastian's grandmother, Seth's mother, and told her that this 15-year-old boy who was SAed is a PDF file, which we do know that there is a cycle of abuse that can happen when people are SAed. They can grow up to continue to carry that on, which is absolutely awful, but it doesn't always happen. Just because someone is SAed doesn't mean that they're going to go SA other people. But that seems to be what Chris is claiming here. Now, what evidence and proof does Chris have to say this? Other than that, I don't know. Or is it just Chris and the Proudfoots taking anything they can grab at to make an issue, like they've done in the past. Because on top of that, now there's claims that Chris has said he doesn't want Sebastian around his daughter, which, if true, is very scary and very troubling and worrisome. Because we've all been asking this whole time, what would be the motive of Sebastian going missing? Well, Chris is currently in a legal battle with Nina still, trying to get custody of his daughter again, and what could be standing in the way? Maybe possibly the stepson, who we can't find any photos of him with, who he has admitted to smacking with a belt, who he has openly called a liar. So ask yourself this: could Sebastian disappearing solve that issue? Do these new allegations give more motive for Kait and Chris to have done something to Sebastian? Could that give motivation for Sebastian not being in the home anymore? Could Sebastian affect his favor in the court case? We've seen from the allegations in the past, if true, that Chris and his family will do anything to get custody of Faith. Especially if he's claiming that Sebastian's a PDF file. I don't think a court would want a young child around the same age he was SAed in the home with someone he's claiming is an SAer now as well. Even though nothing has come out for evidence or proof that Sebastian has SAed anyone or touched anyone inappropriately. All of this is slowly reminding me of what we were hearing in the Ruby Frankie case. As soon as pressure was put on Ruby, she immediately started claiming that her son was a PDF file to punish him and to get what she wanted. And it's disturbing if that is what is happening here. But then we have to play devil's advocate here, because if something did happen to Sebastian relating to all of that, I don't understand why he would have had to have gone missing, because he was supposed to move in full time with Seth, so wouldn't that have solved the issue to begin with? Now that is, unless he wasn't moving in with Seth fast enough, and the court case was proceeding faster than that date. So it wouldn't have solved the issues with the court case then. But then that just makes me wonder, if there was issues with that, why wouldn't they just tell Seth to take him? Because it seems like Seth wanted him anyways, and they were just waiting for Sebastian to finish off school. So if there really was this urgent time frame and matter, why wouldn't they just ask him if he could take Sebastian earlier? Because of XYZ. I feel like Seth would have just said fine. Disappearing a kid is a lot more work and a lot more complicated than just saying, hey, can you take him? Yet, we see way too often people make crazy decisions instead of the simpler choice. What I don't understand for Chris, though, however, is for someone who has so many allegations against him towards not liking children and being physically abusive towards children, why the hell would he want to marry and date and be with so many women who have children? And then also fighting for custody of a child who he allegedly didn't want to begin with. That's one that really racks my brains. And I know it goes into a lot of the psychological side of all of this conversation. And I don't want to diagnose people because I am not a professional and I do not know Chris actually personally, but it really makes me wonder. And I really am curious too about his other ex-wives as well and what they would have to say. Now, regarding all of what we just talked about, Kait has also now come up with a statement in the comment section of Facebook giving her side of the story, which is, let me say, it's interesting to me that after a month of her son being missing, now is the time she chooses to speak up. And now is the time she decides to defend herself. And a lot of people are speculating whether she wrote this or if Chris wrote this. Either way, let's look at what she wrote on Facebook. It reads, and I quote, "That child was not 13 and we did not allow my son to be abused. My son received all the available help he could get. Multiple therapists were involved. His doctor did know because he went to the doctor and got checked immediately. There are so many lies in his story, including him failing to mention where Seth got banned from the base for his violent tendencies, where at the time my son was seeing psychiatrists and psychologists to help him with his trauma from being assaulted by this child. Let me be clear. I think it is sickening that this man is airing my son's trauma online. My son deserves better than that. When we find him, and I believe in my heart we will, the truth will come out. He's doing his best to slander us as parents, but my son is loved and cared for and always will be. Public opinion based on lies, assumptions, and half-truths is rampant because of things like this, which has nothing to do with finding Sebastian. I will not stoop so low as to partake in a back-and-forth argument with him. God knows the truth, and the truth always comes out. Please stop the madness and focus on finding Sebastian because that is the most important thing." End quote. So Kait's essentially disputing what Seth has said and is now going back to claiming Seth is the violent man. Now, whether the child was 13 years old or was younger or older, she is confirming that Sebastian was SAed by this person. And what I would really like to see, because everyone on either side is spitting all of these accusations at each other, is receipts. I would like to see receipts from both parties. I also think it's funny that Kait claims that she's not going to stoop too low, but then she claims violence against Seth. So she is stooping low. I also find it interesting that Kait seems to be showing more emotion in this Facebook comment than she's shown in any of her interviews. Why has it taken this for her to speak up? And to Kait herself, you say that everyone needs to be focusing on finding Sebastian, yet why aren't you out there finding your son? You're his mother. Why are hundreds of volunteers more dedicated to finding your son than you are? I don't care if you and Seth have a rocky history. Let me tell you, my parents and their divorce, they had a rocky history as well. Yeah, I know if I had gone missing, they would have been out there searching for me together. They would have been out there day after day searching for me despite their feelings for each other. Because as you said yourself, the focus should be on finding Sebastian. So why aren't you out there with Seth searching? Because as you said yourself, no one should be focusing on all this other fluff and bullshit. Yet you apparently are, because you're not out there searching for your son. Let me know if that's a hot take. Either way, the more and more information comes out, it really is just proving that there is a lot of trauma and a lot of secrets in this family. More than we may ever know. This is probably just the tip of the iceberg. And while we talk about allegations and accusations and all of that crap, let's talk about Chris's sister Melissa, who we talked about extensively in my previous video, because not only was Melissa one of the last people to see Sebastian alive, she was also involved with Nina's situation of her daughter being taken away from her as well, and that whole drama. Well, it seems Melissa has now spoken out about how people are questioning her motives, and she is pissed off. And I don't even care to read her entire statement because the first sentence was enough to make me want to stop. Because she said, and I quote, "I am so sick of people blaming me for the actions of a 15-year-old boy who left his house in the middle of the night." End quote. That right there. No matter the level of heat that she is getting, why the hell does this woman have so much hate against a 15-year-old autistic boy who is missing that she is blaming him for getting backlash? That doesn't sit right with me at all. That is her opening sentence to her rant. And it did the opposite thing that she thought it was going to do. Between Melissa blaming Sebastian for people questioning her motives and then Chris calling Sebastian a liar on open television, it's giving me the most icky feeling towards the Proudfoots, because that tells me right there how they view Sebastian. They call him a liar, they blame him for everything, and there's also now allegations that Chris called him a PDF file. Why is everything so negative about Sebastian when he is the one that's missing? Why is that the narrative that's being put out by them about this young boy, by grown adults? Let me know how you feel about all that. Now let's talk about some more red flags and some more inconsistencies and some more stuff that has been pointed out from the previous interviews. In the last video, when we were going over stuff like that, I kept pressing that I found it odd that there was no scent found at the home of Sebastian that led anywhere. And it sounds like Seth is also now questioning that, saying he doesn't think his son walked out of that house. Seth also made statements that he thinks someone has Sebastian in their home and that they keep moving him around to avoid being found. And Seth has said that not only are him, the volunteers being followed, but that people are now taking down Sebastian's missing persons flyers. Who the hell is doing this? Why are people trying to stop the search for Sebastian and trying to stop him from being found? Now, if you remember that when Katie and Chris went on Nancy Grace, Nancy asked Chris if he wanted to do a polygraph because Chris said he hasn't done one yet. And Chris said, yes. He said a big yes. He said sure as hell he would do it. Yet when Nancy presented him with the test, Chris now says he doesn't want to do it. And he allegedly said that the TBI told him not to do the test, and he is now refusing to take it. One, why would the police tell him not to do a test? Why would they even care if he does a polygraph test with someone else? Again, I agree. Polygraphs aren't 100% true, but it is still strange to me. I've also seen a lot of people talk about how police won't tell you if you passed a test or not, yet Katie claims that police told her she passed. So I don't know. However, I've now seen screenshots floating around where Chris is calling Nancy Grace a liar. In this text message, he says, and I quote, "Law enforcement told me they were going to administer the polygraph themselves. When I was told this, I informed Nancy's team and told them I would let them know after that one was done. I haven't told her I wouldn't do it. I told her after law enforcement conducts theirs. But see, she hasn't told you all the truth either." End quote. All I have to say is I'm really interested in seeing what Nancy has to say that, because I know she'll come with receipts. So now let's just talk about the whole concept for a moment, that Chris and Katie aren't searching, yet they have time to argue with people on the internet. Because why the hell is Chris messaging with these random people that are reposting these screenshots now? Why are they spending so much time defending themselves on the internet instead of searching for Sebastian? The last thing I would be doing if I was being accused of stuff is arguing in the comment section or arguing with people over Facebook Messenger or text message about my innocence. What they're being accused of is some serious stuff. And to argue over like a Facebook Messenger or a comment section is just It's crazy to me, and that is the last thing that I think I would do if I was being accused of stuff like that. Instead, their feet should be on the pavement searching for Sebastian. And honestly, this whole arguing back and forth online reminds me a lot of what Summer Wells' parents did after she went missing. If you don't know the Summer Wells case, you should definitely dive into that. She also went missing not far from where Sebastian did. She vanished in broad daylight when her mother and grandmother were only feet away, apparently. But they did the exact same thing after she went missing. They went and did interviews where they said crazy things. They gave multiple different stories that had inconsistencies. They were online arguing with people. It was a whole mess. To this day, Summer Wells has still not been found. I think about Summer often, and I really do wonder what happened to her. Now, there's been some more inconsistencies pointed out as well from the interviews. There's been a lot of conversation around the fact that it seems like this definitely seemed to be an ongoing thing or a reoccurring thing, and that this wasn't just a one-time thing. Because on Nancy Grace, Chris claimed that there was never a CPS situation. CPS never came. However, in the other interview Chris did with Smiley World, he claimed that CPS showed up during dinner. On top of that, I noticed something else that was pointed out from the previous interviews, and that was that when the CPS worker showed up at dinner, Chris mentioned that he knew the CPS worker, which either means there's some kind of conflict of interest there, or the CPS worker had been there before. So which is it? Because that would mean that this wasn't the first time that CPS came, which must mean there is a reoccurring issue in the household. On top of that, another lie that has been pointed out is that Chris told Nancy Grace that he had hit Sebastian with the belt 3 years ago. However, in the other interview, it was said that he hit Sebastian with the belt when he was 15 years old, which would have meant it had to have been about a month before he disappeared in that time frame because Sebastian just turned 15 in December. So again, which is it? Why are none of these stories lining up? Now, we obviously can't say for sure that Chris and Katie are involved in Sebastian's disappearance. But what we can say, if they lie about such simple things as those I just mentioned, like the CPS calls, for instance, and what was going on with Sebastian, if they're going to lie about stuff like that, how can we trust anything else that they've said? Such as their stories about Sebastian's disappearance. That's all I'm going to say about that. There's also been a lot of comparisons with Chris and Katie leaving the state to the Lori and Chad Daybell case, where after Lori's 2 children went missing, they flew off to Hawaii. Same thing is happening here. Sebastian goes missing. His mother leaves the state. It's very weird, I will say. There's just so many odd comparisons and inconsistencies here. On top of that, I've seen a lot of talk about this trip to Alaska. And I'm going to say right here, I don't have too much information on it, but I wanted to include it here, and I would love to know more information if you have it. So let's chat down below if you have more information on it. But from what I've learned, 2 days after Sebastian was reported missing, Chris's parents drove to Alaska. That's a 66-hour drive. If they, for example, drove from Hendersonville to Anchorage. 66 hours across the US and Canada. That is a hell of a drive to make. Right now, I've also seen whispers that they possibly drove partway and then got on a plane and flew to Alaska from another destination. But that does lead us back to theories, because we talked a lot in part 1 and we've now talked in part 2 about the idea of someone having Sebastian and keeping him hidden somewhere. And it really does make me question if Sebastian was taken by someone to be hidden somewhere, such as maybe the Proudfoot family, just like what happened with Faith. If Chris's parents possibly took Sebastian somewhere to hide him somewhere. And if they left only 2 days after their step-grandson went missing to go on a trip to Alaska, which honestly is just a little wild to me too. I mean, there are always extenuating circumstances. We don't know all the details again, obviously, but that's just a very far weird trip to make when your step-grandson goes missing. But is there a possibility that Sebastian could have been taken somewhere across the country? If they did drive as far as it's alleged they did drive, there are multiple states. There's an entire different country they could have gone through that Sebastian could have either been taken to, or if foul play was involved, he could have been dumped. Again, according to all of the allegations, especially the ones that Nina made, it seems like Chris's family will do anything for him. It's a crazy thought, it's a crazy theory, but I really do wonder if police are looking at possibilities such as that. I really hope they're looking into stuff such as that, and they're looking into every possible lead in detail. I really hope that Sebastian's family can get answers to where he is and what has happened to him, and I'm really hoping that this doesn't go cold like the Summer Wells case. Now, before we go, I also seen that citizens in Hendersonville are calling for repentance and a criminal investigation against Chris Proudfoot at a rally that is taking place on Saturday, April 6th, which is just tomorrow as I'm filming this video, at the streets of India Lake in Hendersonville, Tennessee. And people are rightfully pissed off because nothing seems to be happening despite all of these allegations coming out, and police aren't really speaking on any of this. They're just saying that people are spreading rumors and just talking a lot, yet Seth is doing more searches, it seems, than the police are. And it seems the police did do a recent search when the glasses were found, but they've now also pulled back their search again, and they seem to just be looking through leads and tips at this point. And it really, really makes me wonder what's going on behind the scenes. Obviously, the public isn't privy to that information. I understand police like to keep things close to the vest, but with all of this strange information coming out, it really makes me wonder the paths that police are taking right now and where they're kind of leaning towards. And I'm really hoping they have more information than we'll have. I really do hope so. So as of right now, I know Seth is going to be going on the Pascal show tonight to kind of dispute what Katie put out online, but I wanted to put this video out and talk to you all about this stuff right now. So I'm really interested to see what Seth has to say about Katie's allegations now, and the whole back and forth of this is just crazy. But what I do want to know is how you're all feeling about this new information. Just, it's a shit show. I'm just going to say that. It's kind of just a shit show at this point. But let's have a conversation down below. As always, I'm going to continue keeping you updated on all of this. It's a lot. It honestly is. And the more stuff that keeps coming out, the more my heart hurts for Sebastian to think that he was in the middle of all of this turmoil, all of this drama, on top of now knowing that he has also been traumatized as a young child. This poor kid has been through so much, and now he is missing. Where is he? What happened to him? If you have any tips and information, I'll have the contact information down below for the TBI and the other authorities that are involved in this case. But please, if you know something, say something. If you see something, say something. And as always, I hope you all stay safe out there. Lock your windows and doors, and I hope to see you in the next video.